Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Radium and today I have another weapon showcase for you. I'll be reviewing every single Moonlord weapon in Terraria Journey's End, which is the final update of Terraria pretty much. I've received a lot of requests for this one in all honesty, very much so compared to the other two I've done. And since there's not too much more to cover on these weapons, I figured I'd do obviously the final boss as the last one. Maybe I'll do some more in the future if they update the game, as well as that just for the sake of completion, but for the time being I'm going to be following some advice I've received, and just trying to do it regardless. To get started with, I'm just going to update you on the changes I've done with my loadout. I'm not letting anything influence the test this time, so no armor, and all of these accessories don't really do anything for increasing damage, and the mana flower is just there for the sake of getting a consistent value on the magic weapons, which should be quite reasonable. Additionally, for the ranged weapons, just very standard, like minimum ammo basically. It's going to make it a little bit difficult, but I think I'll be able to manage regardless. And the boss I'll be testing these weapons out on is still Queen Slime, but I'll be doing it in Master Mode to compensate. Yep. Alright, with that said though, let's get into it. The Moonlord has 9 unique drops of its own, I believe. Used to have another one, but that got changed, and we'll get to that later. I'm gonna go off on the order that these weapons are ranked. So starting off, we've got the Meowmere. This is a brilliant sword. Drop for the Moonlord, it does 200 base damage with no damage increases whatsoever. Very fast speed, strong knockback, and it is a material for the Zenith. It shoots these cats out, which bounce, and after a few bounces, I believe they explode on impact. So that makes them incredibly strong in my opinion. It's a great weapon. Oh god, sorry. Okay, apparently game doesn't like me spamming Meowmere much. Alright, so in terms of DPS, on single target you're looking at maybe like 1200, 1300, anywhere from 1000 to like 1300 damage I believe. And for multi-target, the weapon does pierce, which will increase damage exponentially. So that makes it viable for events, as well as bosses which spawn their own like minions to help out. So yeah, it's a pretty good item in all honesty. In terms of a boss though, I don't really know how it'll fare, but it should be pretty strong. I mean, it's Moonlord gear, no matter how weak I am. It'll be quite good in this environment, I think, because they'll just obliterate everything. None of the guys the Queen Slime summons will be able to really land a hit on me. The only thing I've got to worry about is dodging the projectiles, which apparently I can't do. Yeah, this is a great weapon. Another thing I've noticed is, unlike some of the weapons that are dropped from the Moonlord, this one is great fun to use. So I'll be honest, it's nowhere near the strongest weapon, but it's just good fun, and that's all you could really ask for with this kind of weapon. I have late game gear, but nothing's influencing the damage, so I should still get a valid reading. Yeah, the only flaw of this weapon is the projectiles don't have well, they have a trajectory, and so that means that unlike other weapons, they can't just go on infinitely, which is something of a downfall, but it's not too significant. It makes it kind of hard to use for Moonlord, for example, but apart from that, it's just a solid weapon. And just so fun to use. This is honestly one of my personal favourites from the Moonlord. Next up, everyone, we have the Starraft. This is another sword from the Moonlord. It does 110 base damage with very fast speed and strong knockback. It is another one of the crafting materials for the Zenith. And despite doing less damage in terms of base hits, it has a very different effect. It shoots these projectiles from the sky that, well, several of them shoot per swing and they all do great damage. You'll see here we're looking at about 1000 DPS, and with the sword as well. Oh, I think it gives invincibility frame, so it won't actually do all that much more. But it's consistent 1000 damage with no buffs at all. And in terms of multi-target, it's again slightly short compared to the Meowmere, but still does a great job in my opinion. Additionally, you'll note that the stars can go anywhere on the screen. You can shoot them sideways by aiming high up, and you can also just hit really anywhere. They pierce through blocks occasionally, but not all the way through your screen. In terms of defeating the Queen Slime, I don't know how this thing will do compared to the other option. Let's see. Yeah, this is doing pretty great. I'd say this is on par with the Meowmere for this fight, but it's definitely a lot more versatile because the projectiles of the Meowmere, obviously having the trajectory is a real letdown. And for fights like the Empress of Light, you're really not optimizing your damage. Whereas this, it can almost guarantee you'll hit that kind of boss. And if you learn how to angle the stars right, you can obliterate bosses like the Moonlord, the Empress, even this, despite it being sort of an earlier game boss. The reason I'm using the Queen Slime for testing is because it's a pretty fair fight. It like shows what all of Terraria has to offer, really. So I figure it's a good like placeholder. It has agility, it has strength, it's decently difficult, honestly. And it's just a great way of testing out all of these weapons. But yeah, that's the Star Wrath. It's a questionable sort. Some people don't like it, but it's definitely up there for me. And it's a must-have for late-game melee users. The final melee weapon we have to rank in terms of the Moonlord drops is the Terrarian. There's a lot of debate on that name, but it does 190 melee damage. It's a yo-yo, which additionally shoots projectiles out, which is just amazing. In terms of single target DPS, you're looking at significantly higher than the other two, from anywhere from 1300 damage to 1500. When you're not aiming it, it does slightly less, but the projectiles additionally home into enemies, doing a lot more damage. And with other optimal accessories, this thing can do, like, idealistically twice the damage if you're lucky. In terms of pierce, it's kind of difficult to gauge because it'll be really difficult to control in comparison to the other swords, which did a great job for piercing. But it could be useful potentially. In terms of a boss, however, I really don't know because unlike the two swords, this has a designated range that can be increased by the usage of the yo-yo glove. Not the yo-yo glove, sorry, the white string or the yo-yo bag. But this fight might actually be hard because I have to stay close to the boss. So I may even need to turn God mode on. If that calls for it, but I should be okay. You'll see even when the yo-yo is not connecting, the projectiles do a consistent 1000 damage. And although they do disappear quite quickly, they do have good pierce in the meantime. And like in this kind of situation, you'll just see the boss get absolutely torn to shred. Because I can keep a consistent 1500 DPS on it whilst gliding along. And yeah, it's just great, honestly. This thing is obviously enough the best non-sword melee weapon in the game, in my opinion. And yeah, it's arguably, without the Zenith, it's the strongest Moonlord melee drop in my opinion. Despite not being my favourite, because it just feels a tiny bit standard to me in terms of the sprite. And I got the Meowmere as my first melee drop, so obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased, but it's great fun to use, very usable in like most situations anyways. Another must-have for melee users. Moving on to the Ranger class next up, we have the SDMG. This is an incredible ranged weapon drop from the Moonlord. It does 85 range damage with insanely fast speed and a 66% chance not to consume ammo. This weapon's been in the game for a long time, but it's been buffed with the introduction of Terraria 1.3. And it's basically just an immensely strong version of the Mega Shark. You'll see, it does work exactly like that. It doesn't customize the bullets unless you use custom ammunition. On a single target, without any alterations, you're looking at about 1300, 1200 DPS again. Which seems like a pretty consistent value of all of these weapons. It's at something of a disadvantage here, because obviously I'm just using standard bullets. With things like Chlorophyte, Crystal, Luminite, Ichor, it'll do a lot more damage than this. And additionally, a new loadout would definitely increase DPS a lot. I don't know how this thing's going to do, honestly, against the Queen Slime. It'll do a lot better with better bullets, obviously. But I feel it's fair ranking it with standard bullets. Alright, let's see. Yeah, despite not being able to pierce, it still pretty much shreds through anything he summons. Just because of how high speed and like just fast the weapon is. As well as that, when you combine this with something like Ichor, it'll do even more damage. Or even Betsy's Wrath if you're that patient. Just, yeah, absolutely shredding. Here we go, the second phase, and this is where the weapon will just excel. Because we can literally just sprint. I'll turn around here. But you can literally just run. And just keep spraying. Despite not hitting every single shot, I'm guessing loads of DPS. Like, look at that. Consistently just under 1,000, and this is just with, like, the lowest possible damage on this weapon. Unless I was getting, like, prefixes and that. When paired with Chlorophyte and Luminite bullets, I'd say this is arguably the strongest ranged weapon in the game. But there is also a debate coming up for the next weapon, which I'm going to review. The Celebration Mark II is a rocket launcher, or an explosive using weapon in the Ranger class, which was added within Terraria Journey's End. It replaced the Celebration because it was seen as way too weak for a Moonlord drop. And in terms of what it does, it shoots various projectiles with different properties. I'm using Rocket 1, so this is like a minimum Celebration Mark II basically. In terms of damage, you're looking at a lot higher on the surface than the SDMG. You're looking at like 1600 to 1800 damage, which is great. I'm not going to try and use too many shots because I want to save them, but on multiple target, the explosives are small, but it grow with the usage of better rockets. And you're looking at like potentially 5,000 damage on these targets, so it does stack quite well. In terms of the Queen Slime, I'm pretty confident this thing will decimate the boss. Although, being potentially a little bit diverse is not always a good thing. Yeah, despite being stronger than the SDMG, technically speaking anyways, it's a lot harder to use. Because, like, half the time you're not hitting because the projectiles have such different properties. You'll see some have split shots, some go extremely far, some have a trajectory. Others just go straight, but it's incredibly hard to gauge which one you're going to get. If not impossible, so you just kind of have to shoot and hope, honestly. But if you're landing your shots and you're against the right kind of enemy, this is probably your best ranged weapon in the game. Moving on from that, we now have the weapons from the Mage class. Starting off, we have the Lunar Flare. This is a spell that gets greatly outshined by its Moonlord drop counterpart, but in all fairness, it's still an incredibly strong weapon. On single target, you're looking at potentially 2,000 DPS, but it drops as the potion sickness kicks in. With the right accessories, this thing can do a lot more than this, but you'll see it tank here, just because I don't have an optimized loadout. In terms of multiple enemies, I don't really know how it's going to do. I believe it explodes, so it is going to do quite a bit. And you'll see those explosions actually do a ton of damage. It peaked at around 9,000 there for a moment. And then once again it'll slowly decrease as the mana sickness kicks in. Additionally, it's a very versatile spell. It's basically a late game Blizzard staff, which is obviously a very nice weapon to use. Let's see. In terms of keeping the Queen Slime at bay, oh no, it's hitting the dummies, sorry. I'm going to go to the other side and fight it from here. It can be a little bit hard to aim because you have to predict where the boss is going to move in some cases. But against enemies like the Empress of Light and the Moonlord, you'll barely have to do that. And yeah, something like Ichor can definitely help this weapon because with mana sickness, your damage is going to be cut down quite a lot. But the high fire rate should very easily make up for it. And see, even when I'm struggling, technically speaking, it's doing loads of damage. And in this kind of situation, it's obliterating like 90% of the minions before they even get a chance to land, as they're spawning. And this is with mana sickness, it's insane. People underappreciate this weapon a lot, just because of the counterpart, basically. But it is just incredible. And even if you don't get the last prism, it's still just a brilliant weapon to have for all mages. Next up, we have what is seen by most people as the only rival to the Zenith. The last prism is just an incredible weapon, there's no way around it. It does 100 magic damage on the base, but it does a lot more than that when it gets going. It uses 11 mana and is incredibly costly in terms of the super mana potions. But when you use it, it shoots this like spiraling rainbow, and once it homes in, it does approximately 3 times the damage, which is just amazing. This is by far like viewed as the second strongest weapon in the game, Potentially even stronger than the Zenith in some people's eyes. But you'll see, with Mana Sickness, you're looking at about 2000 DPS without any buffs. And it infinitely pierces, which is what's just so incredible about it. There's just nothing wrong with this weapon at all. It's usable, infinite pierce. There's honestly not much more to say, so let's just get into the Queen Slime fight. Okay, here we go. You'll see, most likely, the enemy's already dead before they even get a chance to spawn in. Even with the damage deduction, thanks to mana usage. It just destroys everything. Literally just dead. And if you want to clear out the platform with the enemies, just hold down for a moment. Then get running, and very, very soon the boss will be dead. Honestly, it's that easy. Some people even claim this weapon to be stronger than the Zenith, which is debatable, but it's just the best, really. It's by far the strongest out of any weapon we've reviewed today, and I personally believe it to be the strongest Moonlord drop. Okay, everyone, we're on to the final two weapons, which are both summoner weapons. This one's a lot harder to gauge, because both of them are sentries, and it's just incredibly hard to gauge how strong they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself the monk armor, just for the sake of additional sentries, basically. Just so we can really show these weapons off, what they are. So we can have 3 of these active at once. It doesn't do too much of the weapon, but I just want to give these a chance because they're so much weaker than everything else here otherwise. Starting off though with the Rainbow Crystal Staff, it does 104 summon damage. It cannot attack, unfortunately, in terms of dummies. So we'll have to test them out on just the bosses. This applies for the Lunar Portal Staff as well, which kind of sucks, but what can you do? I'll just summon 3 of them up here as the fight starts. But they are very versatile summons. And when he's up here, I can try and show my best what this weapon does. It shoots this barrage of small crystals, which do a ton of damage. They do pierce a lot, and they just do a lot of damage overall. The summoner, well, the sentry side of the summoner class is still very underpowered in my eyes. It's not really usable for this kind of boss. I doubt I'll even be able to finish this boss off like this, just because it'll take so long and be a really painful fight otherwise. And I'm even taking loads of damage with the monk armor on, so it's not ideal. You'll just see, it's honestly a better crowd control tool, and I would never optimize for a sentry loadout. Rather use another class, like literally any class, and then just pop one in the background whilst you're doing whatever your task is. Okay guys, the final weapon we have to review for this episode is the Lunar Portal Staff. It does 65 summon damage. Once again, it is a sentry, which is something of a letdown in most people's eyes, but... oh wait, sorry, wrong summon. But in my opinion, it's not as good as the Rainbow Crystal Staff. You'll see why in a moment. But it's just not very diverse in terms of its usage. Sure, it does have infinite pierce, and it does a bit of damage, but... yeah, the sentries are just unusable, really. It's so difficult to main them. And, like, this one's okay. The Rainbow Crystal does better in crowds, in my opinion, despite this one having infinite pierce. Just because it's kind of sluggish, the projectile doesn't always go where you want it to go, as the AI is just not the best. And, you know, just the summoner drops from the Moonlord are just really bad. Rather than revamping some of the Ranger class drops and adding the Zenith, I personally think they should have added a new active summon you could get from the Moonlord. For example, the Terra Prisma is basically the best summon, well, tied with the Stardust Dragon in my opinion. And if you could get something stronger than both of those weapons from the Moonlord, even if it's literally just like a single summon that you can have, that acts as like a supreme version of those, then that would be incredible. Just because, you know, it's a little bit languid in terms of the 2 summons you do get, as neither of them are really good enough. Okay everybody, that's all of the weapons tested for the Moonlord drops. In conclusion, all of them are honestly great. There's so much diversity between all of them. and every single one of them can pretty much be used to kill the Moonlord again, and will definitely speed up your grind if not. And with that said though, that's pretty much the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you already haven't. And until the next one, I just have to say thank you, and in a bit guys.